This is the second lecture for module interaction. I'm sorry, for Java GUI interaction. And all I'm going to do for this particular lecture is go through the flood map example. And then we'll get into the animations example in the next lecture. So again, the flood map example, it's showing you a randomized terrain. The terrain is represented by rectangles in rectangular grid. Each rectangle is colored according to the average value of its elevation, and then anything that's underwater goes blue. If we run this program, looks like that. And so here I am at 0 meters, 3 meters. By the way, the reason some of those are blue is because they're at 0. 3 meters, flood goes up to 5 meters, flood goes up to 8 meters. These black squares are actually an error in my code. I did not assign a color to them because I miscalculated a rounding error. So someday I'll go back and fix that. Okay, so as we go up and down, we keep getting this. Alright, so let's talk about how this is going to work. If we do the model view controller, this is clearly the view. These colored rectangles are the view. The colored rectangles, though, are not the map. They're the presentation of the map to the user. They're the view of the map. The actual map has to have data for the elevation. There's no data for elevation here, there's just colors. So where do I get data for elevation? Well, I have to make an actual map model. And the model I make is a standard one in simulation when people are talking about terrain. Basically, you take the average elevation of a hunk of terrain, and then you put a post in the ground of that height. It's called a post map. So if here I've limited everybody between 0 and 10 meters. If somebody's at 2 meters, it basically has a 2-meter post. If someone's at 5 meters, it has a 5-meter post. And that's going to be the average for that piece of terrain. Now, how did I create it? Randomly. I randomly created numbers between 0 and 10. The black squares is that I forgot to assign a color to 10. That's what the black squares are about. So I have a model, which is the post map, and I have a view, which are these colored rectangles, and then I have a controller that allows me to manipulate the level of water in the model. Okay? 3 files. So the first file is the post map file. The second one is the top-level GUI file. The third one, kind of like the example we saw before with the loan calculator, it's actually a combination of GUI and controller elements. And that third file is actually going to be the pane that sets up what you're looking at here. So if you remember, we have nodes go in a pane, and pane goes in a scene, and scene goes in the stage. So since the nodes go in the pane, and these buttons, that's these buttons, right? Those are the nodes that have all of the actions. Since the nodes go in the pane, and the pane has all these rectangles, the pane serves as both the controller, the interface towards the model, and as part of the GUI. But I did it as a separate file. Now, why did I do the pane as a separate file? Because it was kind of ugly. There was a lot of stuff to set up there. Most of it was just about laying out rectangles and laying out buttons, and then creating the method that would color the buttons. That's what most of that was about. Don't keep that in your top-level GUI. You don't need to. You can create a separate class. So I created my own flood pane, and because I needed it to act like a pane, right, a normal Java GUI pane, I said map pane extends flood pane. So now I have a child of the, map pane extends pane. So I have a child of the pane, meaning that I can use it just like a pane, and I can modify it to suit my needs. That's what inheritance is all about, right? We take a generic thing, we modify it to suit our needs. So if we look at the code for this, here's the post map, and it's very simple. All it is a 2x2 array of integers that I call posts. That's my model of the terrain. And then I have to think about, okay, what kind of methods do I want? Well, I want to make a random map to initialize it. I could begin adding in here again. If I wanted to do something more sophisticated, I would bring in the ability to load up files that actually represent real terrain. But I make the random map. Now, the random map is made up by n, row by column, n rows, m columns of posts, and then for each post I give it a random number between 0 and 10. And then the only other things I had was, it might be interesting for somebody to set an individual element in that 2x2 array or get an individual element in that 2x2 array. That's it. That's the whole model. Most models will not be this simple, of course. Then the GUI, top level, doesn't do much either. That's it. I build a pane, I put the pane in the scene, I put the scene in the stage, and I show it. Now why aren't there all those details about the pane? Because I actually built, and again, map pane extends pane. So I'm going to do all the detailed work, all the stuff that clutters up the code in a separate class. This is what object-oriented programming is about, right? Deciding what classes you need. If you need a particular job to be done, maybe you need a special class for it. And the job that I need done is to set up all these rectangles and buttons and be able to color them. Put that in a separate class. You have this code, so I'm going to go over it briefly. But I don't import anything special here. I import the buttons, the labels, the rectangles, and that's it. Notice, by the way, under Map GUI, I didn't need to import hardly anything. Application, scene, and stage. Why didn't I have to import the pane? Because I'm going to build my own pane. I don't need to bring in the Java version of a pane. I'm going to build my own. Now here I had to bring in my Java version of a pane because I'm going to extend it. Okay, I have some attributes. I build myself a post map. That's my model that tells me the height, the elevation at each center of each rectangle. And then I build my view, which is going to be an array of rectangles. Now these are the rectangles that show up on the screen. The post map is just a list of integers. These are the rectangles that show up on the screen. So there's my model, there's my view. Our size is the rectangle size, right? I'll need that in order to lay out the rectangles appropriately. I initialize it with water level of 3. And then here's my constructor. And notice again, you're still not looking at details, but you should be able to walk through that and have a good idea. If I named things well, you would have a good idea as to what's happening. Let's see, map.makeRandomMap. Gosh, sounds like we're making a random map. Create the rectangles in the pane. Color the rectangles, make the buttons for the water level, and then color the water level. So creating the rectangles in the pane is going to be the thing that creates individual rectangles in that two-dimensional array of rectangles and adds them to the pane. Then color rectangles is going to color them based on their elevation. In other words, what's their post value in the post map. Then I can make the buttons, and then I'm going to color the water level. Everybody who's lower than the current water level gets to be turned blue. All the details happen in the methods, and each method should do one simple little job. So create rectangles in pane, not a very long method, and it does a simple little job. For every, first we actually create the two-dimensional array for the rectangle map, and then we have to actually remember, when you create an array for objects, if I have an array of rectangles, I don't have a bunch of rectangles. I have locations in which to build rectangles. All right, I have the warehouse in which I can put rectangles. So I have to go through every single spot in that array and actually build a specific rectangle. And all this mess over here is about making sure that r size times I and r size times j, all that is making sure they line up properly in their proper row and column position. I initially color them black, and I'm sorry, I set the stroke black, color them white, and then I add each individual rectangle to the pane. Add children, add that specific individual rectangle. Coloring the rectangles, all I did is I used a switch statement because I know that I made each of the posts between 0 and 10 as an integer value. I still haven't put 10 in here, I should fix it, right? And so I know that I'm going to have exactly 0 or 1 or 2 or 3, right? So I can break that up into cases. So I go through, and again, using a nested loop, I go through every element in the two-dimensional array, and I use my map.getElement, right? Tell me the specific value of the post, right? What's the integer value at that specific place? And then I'm going to color the rectangle based on what I get returned. The thing that took me longest in making this code was getting colors I was happy with. You can spend a lot of time on GUI stuff. Color the water level was much easier. Get the map element, and if it's less than the water level, make it blue. By the way, you'll notice I got the map elements and I didn't store that. I have the post map. I didn't store a version of it here in this particular class. Why wouldn't I do that? Remember, if you can calculate it, don't store it. So anytime I need to get that element value, I just go out to the place where it actually should belong, which is in the model, in the post map. Tell me that value. And the rest of this is about setting up the buttons. So I make a label ahead on top of the buttons. That's make the label. That's this where it says select water level to tell the user what to do. And then I make 4 buttons, BT0, BT3, BT5, BT8, and it's all about making a button, setting the layout for it, and then set on action. And I have to do 2 things when I set the action. I have to if I just did color the water level, the way I wrote color the water level, if I just did that, what color the water level would do is when I go from 3 to 8, it would color, 3 to 5, it would color everybody who's 5 underwater blue. And when I went back to 3, it would color everybody who's less than 3 or less blue, but it would also keep the ones that were at 5. So I had to do it this way. Basically color the rectangles as if there was no water and then put the water level in as a 2-step process, and I do that each time. Once I make one button, cut and paste, and I get all my other buttons pretty quickly. And then it's just a matter of playing around and convincing myself that I have them at a good separation from each other. Again, when you're doing GUIs like this, I do recommend that you draw them out, go to a whiteboard, get out some paper, draw them out. I definitely drew this out before I coded it out, so that you'll have an idea of what you're shooting for, and ideally you can tag, each on your drawing the name of each of these things, so that as you're coding you can refer to your drawing. And then you're going to have to play around with dimensioning just like you with any design. Okay, you have access to the code. Have at it, and I'm going to do an animation for the 3rd lecture.